I have a few questions for the panel before we open the floor for Q&A, and the questions of the floor are absolutely welcome. I'll start with Sam. I would say from your vantage point, how have pharmaceutical innovation strategy changed over the years, and what are the biggest improvements, and what are the most important areas to continue to advance?
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. And I may need also a translator in French, by the way.
It is a coincidence, right away.
Yes, I think Pfizer has taken a big turn in last year in terms of R&D. Our productivity, not surprisingly, as compared to the other companies, was pretty low. And we changed and we took drastic decisions. For example, our budget was reduced by $1.5 billion. So just by doing so, you improve your productivity. So, but it was not the main objective. But clearly, what we changed too, it's in terms of where we wanted to go. And so in terms of product in development, for example, biologics, we changed. We took this decision some years ago. We have a portfolio of roughly 50% of biologics in our portfolio as compared to small molecules. We have now compounds which are more targeting what we call precision medicine, customized medicine. So we also gave more accountability to the CSOs, the Chief Scientific Officers, to make sure that they were in charge of their budget and the direction, the targets. So we really also took a major decision 2 years ago by being organized in business units. And one of the business units is emerging market, and China is a key piece of our business unit. So that's all these changes in the last, let's say, 5 years to today have driven what I would say an increase in our productivity, which we have seen in the last year, with much more products that have been filed, much more product approved. So we are in the right direction. Are we out of the problem? I don't think so. I think there's still a lot to do, and the key component of our strategy will be in Asia.
Thank you, Sam. So next question is for Andy Bush. So what makes Bayer Healthcare an attractive partner for biotech companies and academia?
I think that's important to ask academic partners and biotech what makes us the attractive partner. I do think that we have science and innovation in our genetic footprint. I do think that we have a long history of driving innovation forward with partnerships in mind. I think we have in the past shown that we really contribute our knowledge towards partnerships, that we live partnerships rather than going for the typical I pay, you serve relationship. And I think that is welcomed and that has paid off over the last little while.
Question for Anand. So Asia is often looked upon as an early adopter of innovative technologies. So how can the pharmaceutical industry leverage the innovative technology and Asia's early adoption to enhance the efficiency in R&D overall?
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Jacques. I think when one speaks about technology in the pharmaceutical industry, it really has to be about improving the efficiency of R&D. I think, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, the current model is truly not sustainable. I like to draw comparisons with the aerospace industry because, like a lot of us, I think we spend a lot of time flying in airplanes. And commercial aircraft manufacture is the most highly regulated industry in the world, followed by the pharmaceutical industry. When one looks at how much Boeing or Airbus spends in R&D, it's about 4 to 5%. When one looks at pharmaceutical industry, it's about 18 to 25%. So it's really about using technology to drive speed. It's all about using technology to allow us to make faster decisions. Way too many drugs are killed so late on in development that is not sustainable. So how does this translate into actions here in Asia? I think, and I sort of cover the development space, the late development space, and I'll defer to other panelists to talk about the early space. But certainly in the late development space here in Asia, I think it's all about leveraging technology in hospitals. One would be surprised by the number of hospital systems in Asia which are on the electronic health record systems. So access to data in hospitals, getting that data to the regulatory authorities a lot faster. And so it's access to data, it's the transfer of data, the reporting of data, the analyzing of data, and the warehousing of data for drug development, and how technology can play a role in pulling all of that together, I see as the significant low-hanging fruit here in Asia.
Thank you. So, CY, a question for you. So, what is Astellas' current business model to face those challenges and as Anand say, try to use technology to prevent late stage drug failure, which is much more expensive than early stage drug failure.
Okay, thanks, JJ. Actually, as you may know, Astellas established in 2005 by the merger of the two Japanese companies. One is Fujisawa and another is Yamanouchi, and become second biggest Japanese company. But looking at the global basis, we are still a mid-sized company, ranking around 15 to 17. So in that sense, we need to focus in some certain areas. So we decided to focus a kind of area which has unmet medical needs to be a leader in that category. So our model, Astellas model, is we call the global category leader, GCL model, in order to contribute to the patient's health. So in that sense, now Astellas has presence in urology as well as immunology and transplant areas. And in addition to that, we focus in oncology area to become a leader, although we know about a very competitive field. And as Salomon said, in order to have a good drug, we also implemented a kind of precise medicine, precision medicine, to get into the right patient, to give some benefit to the patient. That is a current Astellas model.
Thank you. So back to you, Sam. So what is Big Pharma doing that is especially admirable in the pharmaceutical innovation space, and what about Asian pharmas and biotech companies, and what do you feel they could learn from each other?
So it's a good question. I would say what we are doing and what we are not doing enough. So there is a piece what we are doing and we have changed dramatically in the last years, which is related to looking for partnership. In the past, I must say that Pfizer was a little bit thought that we can do everything, and in-house, and we have our own research. Now, by being more focused in some key areas, we are looking much more to partnering with other companies, and we are looking for partnering with other companies, multinational companies, biotech companies, academics, even governments and regulatory agencies. So that's a key component of our strategy, what we'd say we are doing quite well. And in Asia, we have also developed this type of partnership. In India, for example, in China, we have a number of partnerships with our ongoing, and we have a presence, R&D presence in all of these countries and beyond China and India. We're in Russia, we're in Brazil, to speak about emerging market. What I would like to see much more is partnership with other multinational companies, and that's what we could do much better. We have some partnership with GSK on V for HIV compounds, and I think that there is a room to increase our productivity through better partnership. And in Asia, what I've been very impressed by is how the governments, especially in China, are involved in developing the R&D piece, and how we can partner with government and to develop this piece. That's how I think it's innovative in the sense of there is a direct involvement from the Chinese government, and I think it's great. And really Pfizer is looking for partnering at every level in China.
Thank you. So back to you, Andy. So how do I mean, how does the business model for pharma R&D in general need to be adjusted, as far as you can tell, in order to stay sustainable in the future, as compared to what's happening today with the generic erosion?
I guess there is not one business model in R&D. I think pretty much every company struggles to find its own business model. So I think if I look at our approach, our strategy clearly is that we say we need to focus on key areas, key therapeutic areas, and we need to focus on key technologies. And everything adjacent to that is something we want to get through partnerships. So I think we took a very conscious decision that in order to be successful in a couple of therapeutic areas where we believe there is a huge unmet medical need left, we want to have our internal efforts. We do believe that there are a couple of technologies where we want to be highly competitive and focus on that, which is on the small molecule area as well as on the biologics area. But if it comes to other additional potential breakthrough access, then I think partnership, and we believe partnerships are the way to go for. If you don't mind, I'd like to add a bit on Sam, what he said about how we see BioAsia in this context.
Actually, I was about to ask you that question, so I'm glad you preempted it.
I think, that there are two aspects. Sam tried to indicate already some of them, which are very important for us. When it comes to innovation, we do see a real innovation pool evolving right now in Asia. And looking at China, looking at the efforts there to attract the best scientists of the world to build up a life science as well as a medical arena which is as strong as it could be, clearly creates a wonderful innovation pool. So there is for us now a chance to tap into innovation where there wasn't that great innovation before, and that's what we're searching for when we look at innovation in China. We don't look for cheap labor, we look for real innovation. And similar things are of course true for Singapore, where I think huge efforts are spent to really come up with a very, very consistent story from the bench to the bedside and back, where you really establish all capabilities to really do very good translational science. And on the development side, obviously, in contrast to the past, we want to involve Asian patients very, very early on in our clinical programs. I think that's very important for us for the future.
Do you do a basic research and development in China, for instance, now? Do you have an R&D center in China?
Yes, we have an R&D center in Beijing, and we have rather strong interactions with quite a number of institutions here also in Singapore. In Beijing, I think we have very strong development efforts, and on the research side, we have a more virtual structured organization which tries to leverage really existing possibilities to network.
And do you also, I mean, it's not quite your space, but do you have manufacturing activities in the Asia Pacific region too?
We do.
In what, in China or Singapore?
Well, we have them all over the place, but I think I should rather talk about early R&D.
Okay.
We have actually representatives here who can talk about manufacturing.
So, Anand, back to you. So as Western companies seek to develop and register their product in Asia and also emerging Asian markets, and that emerging Asian companies seek new capabilities to globalize their own product, which hasn't happened much so far, by the way. I think there hasn't really been, as far as I can tell, any global molecule that came out out of Asia Pacific research so far. I mean, I think it's going to change, but it hasn't really happened yet. So what do you think are the keys to the quote-unquote Asia biopharma kingdom?
Sure. I'll come to that in a couple of minutes, Jean-Jacques. But to your point about innovation in Asia, and is that changing? Are we going to see that change? We're actually living it as a company here. So we've been here since 1993. And today we've got 5,500 people involved in development across the region. If we'd had this conversation, 3 or 4 years ago, I would say 20% of our work in Asia came from US and European companies with clinical trial activity here in Asia. Today, it's 55% of our work comes from within Asia, and 45% of our work comes from outside of Asia. So that innovation in China, that innovation in Korea, Taiwan, Malaysia, Singapore, it's real. It's actually happening. In terms of keys to success in Asia, and I will ask the wider panel to help out here, but I'll just add a few points that I think have helped us get by here in Asia. Firstly, Asia is not one homogeneous region. Asia is lots of different countries and lots of different cultures. So one needs to develop a winning strategy, which is country specific. So what's worked for us in China has not necessarily worked for us in India or some of the other countries. We spend a lot of time, for right reasons, talking about India and China. India and China are very big, but we must not forget that there are 80 million people in Vietnam. There's a population of Germany. There are 240 million people in Indonesia with an economy that exceeded $1 trillion GDP this year. So there are lots of countries in between China and in India, and the strategy has got to be country-specific across that broader region. Secondly, think local and act local. Having local senior management in Asia, having local staff in Asia who understand the thinking behind hospital systems, who understand how key opinion leaders think in Asia is very important. So think local and be local. Thirdly, we should, in the past, clinical development activity, as I said earlier, Asia has been a nice to have for global development. As we all know, Asia is now a must have. So putting Asian patients at the center of what we do in Asia has got to be a key priority for the industry as it expands here in Asia. And I think we often forget another nuance there, in that the value that's going to need to be demonstrated. Most of Asia is self-pay. Most of Asia is not reimbursed. So when one looks at drug development in Asia, being able to drive value in drug development is going to be absolutely critical. And then finally, and I think the others have mentioned it already, being successful in Asia is not about owning 100% of everything one does in Asia. Being successful in Asia does involve strategic alliances with government, does involve strategic alliances with local companies, joint ventures with local companies. So partnerships and collaborations are going to be are critical for success in Asia.
Okay, so CY, I mean, expanding on what Anand said, I mean, have you, in the past few years at Astellas, have you started expanding relationships in Asia, beyond Japan, more actively than has been done in the past?
Yeah, actually, not only for the Asian countries, I think partnering is very important for Astellas as well as the mid-sized companies, because I think success probability is getting low. As you know, 30 years ago, it was said one of 3,000 could be a drug from the discovery to the market. And now, for these days, one of 30,000 could be a drug. So in that sense, in order to overcome this kind of difficulty to make a drug development, I think partnering with other companies, including Asian company, would be very important. In addition to that, I guess another factor would be very important is a kind of open innovation with some alliance with academia in order to get a very good seed for the development and for help the patient health. So with doing that, I think we can have a kind of a sustainable growth and sustainable business.
Thanks. So Sam, so what role do you believe the regulatory system could play in shaping innovation trajectories, and specifically, what positive experience have you had in working with regulators in Asia, China, India in general, and how do you feel more challenging regulatory experiences could be improved? And has Pfizer has any specific experience with Asian regulatory that our audience here could learn from?
Well, so speak about regulatory. That's interesting in the sense of we want to partner with the regulatory agencies. They play a key role in approving our drug, it's obvious. However, if you think about China, for example, the time for clinical trial application takes too long. The time, and it's an impediment to participate to global trials. So it's not like just taking too long. It prevents you from participating to a large trial. Then you have to perform a specific trial for the region. So that means adding cost and delaying approvals. That means that patients will receive the drug much later than other countries. So then for the approval time is also taking too long. For biologics, the request for many patients, 600 patients for biologic, for biosimilar, it's also a problem. Having said that, we are working very closely to the SFDA in order to improve timelines, improve the environment, because we see it as a benefit for the company, but mainly the benefit for the patients. So if we are able, for good reason, to reduce this time cycle, it will be much better. So I've had very good experience in working with the SFDA, and in fact, on one hand, you have the theory, such as 9 to 12 months for the CTA. In fact, it could be 4 to 5 months for the CTA if you work very closely in a good intelligence with the regulators. So my experience with PMDA, SFDA, is to base it on the science. And if you have good argument and very strong argument that there is an unmet medical need, for example, for life-threatening disease, then there is a good collaboration that you can start with and achieve quite more rapid registration. We have had good example with crizotinib for the lung cancer, this precision medicine, where there was a huge unmet medical need. And in Japan, we got approved, this drug was approved quite rapidly with very little, but there was a strong unmet medical need, and the partnership played a key role. And we have quite nice hope, strong hopes that in China, the same path can be seen. So good experience, that on one hand the theory, the practice, and in between the reality.
I guess I actually have the same question for you, Andy. What can you tell the audience about your experiences so far with whether it's SFDA or other Asian regulatory agencies?
I think I can certainly share some of the points Sam made. The general experience is that there is a significant interest in really discussing science and the approach in clinical trial, and that in general you can really come through discussions to an improvement also of processes. So I think overall I would say the interaction we had with regulatory agencies we would consider very fruitful, very positive one. What I would also certainly like to say is that the quality in clinical trials has been a very, very good one. I think that is something which one keeps forgetting. It's not only that we include more and more Asian patients into our trials, but when we look at the quality of data, it actually turns out that actually especially the centers in China or in some Asian countries develop high quality data in our trials, which was just for some of our recent submissions and approvals a key part.
So Anand, do you have anything to share with the audience about your experience with regulatory authorities in Asia?
Yes, I do. I think, to your point, Sam, about China, I fully agree with you. I co-chaired a China Advisory Board meeting in Shanghai about 6 weeks ago, and the key message coming out of that meeting was the message from the government in China, and the government was represented by senior representatives, that if we align our priorities in China with the very urgent and real public health priorities that are in China, these things will get resolved. So, and I think that is true across all countries in Asia, and speaks to my earlier point. It's all about a win-win. us being able to develop drugs in Asia which are relevant in the local country, and then the alignment in terms of timelines with the regulatory authorities, etc., all will happen, will come. And the same applies for Japan.
So CY, I mean, outside of Japan, obviously you have a lot of experience probably dealing with regulators over there, but outside of, I mean, you can talk about Japan, but also beyond Japan in Asia Pacific.
Okay, for Japan situation, I would like to briefly mention on that. Actually, in Japan, there was a problem we call the kind of drug lag. That means approved drug outside of Japan cannot be used in Japan for the time. So in order to resolve this one, I think health authority, Corosho and the PMDA make an effort to ask to the industry to give us some incentive for the pricing. And also, in order to minimize the drug lag, they made every effort to minimize review time of the NDA. As someone mentioned, maybe 10 years ago, it takes 29 months for the NDA review period, but for these days, maybe less than 15 months as an average. So if we have a very innovative drug, more shorter review period in Japan as well. So in that sense, our health authority and the industry in Japan make an effort to become facilitate this review period. In addition to that, PMDA implemented kind of pre-review system for the NDA dossier, including a CMC part or some preclinical part. Review can be made before NDA submission. That is helping our review period, shortening the review period in Japan. So that's the Japanese situation.
So now in terms of global clinical development strategies, back to you, Sam, what is the role of Asia now in your global clinical development strategy? Do you, when you start your global development plan, do you include the Asian region in your plans earlier than you used to, or what is the share of Asia in your overall global development strategy?
So for those who are very familiar with clinical development, we used to have the three bigs: Europe, US, and Japan. So that any clinical development should include these three bigs. And now we've moved, at least with Pfizer, to include China as the fourth big. And any clinical development program within Pfizer does include a specific section on China, Asia. And the reason is very simple. As I said, it's if we have China part of our global clinical development plan, you save time, you save new clinical studies, and China belongs to a global program. So it's beneficial, it's a win-win, as you said, it's a win-win situation. So that's the reason why, as soon as possible, we include China. So it's the usual period was phase 3. We try to include China in phase 2. It's not easy, but we try to include China as early, as I said, as early as possible. When it's not possible, for good reasons, sometimes it's not possible to include China in global program. We have regional programs that start as soon as possible. But in the past, you had to explain why you opt in. Yet now we have to explain why we opt out. So that's a very shift in the mindset in terms of teams. And sometimes you have to convince teams. It's not obvious that they have to go to China because they still focused on the three big. In Pfizer, the creation of an emerging market business unit specifically dedicated to the BRIC-MT, I mean, for being clear, the BRIC-MT, China being one of them and India being the other one, is a clear proof that we are dedicated and we are really focusing on having these countries very early on.
So, and is that the case also at Bayer?
Yeah, looks like we have the same strategy. No, I think we have clearly changed our Asia development paradigm in that context that we even already in phase 1 studies want to include China, try to have them simultaneous to our rest of the world studies. We actually this year have even started with one compound in phase 1 for the first time in Asia. Before we do studies elsewhere, and of course looking forward and looking to our R&D portfolio, there are a couple of targets and a couple of compounds which may address even more concretely the Asian population and Asian patients compared to rest of the world patients. And as a, I think, rather natural consequence, we would also consider then going, of course, first into that population with our clinical studies.
Jacques, if I may add also, just building on this, we have also a phase 1 unit in Singapore. In fact, at the third phase 1, we have one in Brussels, one in New Haven, US and Connecticut, and one in Singapore, which is also key for starting our studies very early on in Asia, and Singapore being part of our strategy very, very early on.
So, Alan, is it a trend you're observing in all your customers, like integrating, Asia-Pacific countries into the global development plans from as early as phase 1, as we just heard?
Absolutely, yeah. So if one looks back in order to look ahead, when we first came here in the mid-90s, it was very much nice to have some sites and have some patients in a global study from Asia. Fast forward to the mid-2000s, it became a must-have in Asia. 3 billion people in Asia who are going to be users of these drugs in the next 10 to 15 years, so we must include sites in Asia. And then where we are today, 2011 through 2013, I suppose, is where we're really seeing this significant transformational shift, where, as I said earlier, an 80-20 split in terms of global-local has now become a 55 local, 45 global split. And so we are working with companies in Asia with compounds that have come out of Asian laboratories that are going into phase 1 in Asia. So we are having to set up a phase 1 service in China, a phase 1 service in India, having to set up a local CRO in China, local CROs in some of the other countries within the region, in addition to the global CRO. So we're seeing that happen. If one looks ahead, I think it's fascinating. I think we're going to see this what I call globalization of healthcare solutions from Asia. And what I mean there is this combination of drugs as well as devices and diagnostics, because we're seeing, in addition to a lot of innovation in the drug space, we're seeing a lot of innovation in the device space and emerging innovation in the diagnostic space. And the convergence of all of those three, I think, will happen real time here in Asia. And then the next step would be to globalize that from within Asia. So I think it's a fascinating time to be here.
CY, do you also now do phase 1 or phase 2 studies in Asia outside of Japan?
Yes, actually, when we conduct a global development, we intend to including Asian country as well, as multinational studies in certain therapeutic area field. But sometimes, frankly speaking, we do have a kind of challenge in including China due to the not slow process, but a long process to get into the IMD process. That doesn't fit our schedule for the asking a China clinical site to join the multinational studies in some cases. So we need to think about a more creative way to how to utilize Asian countries for the participation of the multinational clinical studies. That is our experience.
So I got one more question for the panel before we open to questions from the audience. So as I think I said earlier, outside of Japanese companies, I don't think there has been any global biopharmaceutical molecule coming out of the Asia-Pacific region, outside of Japan. So what has been getting in the way, and when do you anticipate the first one will come out? And if you had to guess, which country will this molecule come from? So starting with Sam.
Thanks.
Handing that over.
It's pharma fiction.
I would anticipate that looking at the landscape, that it's more likely that a biologic molecule will come out as a first as a first Asian Pacific molecule rather than a small molecule, as I believe that this is where lots of the investments go to right now. And I do think that that clearly this type of research is building up very significantly right now. Why hasn't it been? Well, I do think, one should always appreciate cycle times in R&D. And one of the reasons why the R&D model is bust, like we hear very often, is of course the huge cycle times. And if you really consider when were the most significant investments done, when were all the complementary parts of a real value chain in place, well, this is about now, I would say, or over the last 5-6 years. And I would think, that you will see significant innovation resulting in submissions within the next decade, I'm pretty sure.
You don't want to bet which country is going to come from?
China.
China, so you have one vote for China. Sam, now you have had time to think.
Yeah, I have time to think. And are you thinking just about Asia?
Yeah, just talking about Asia.
I think I would agree with Andreas. I think about target, I would also agree that biologics is the most likely. I think what's missing is the path from the molecule to the drug. And that's a process that will need to get experience. And probably that where, as a multinational company, you can partner and help them from moving to the target to the approval. And I think it will take a long time to get there. I would bet on China to find the right target, to maybe find the right molecule, but then I think that will be through partnership that they will get to approval. I don't think at this today they are ready to go straight to the approval process.
Yeah, because they would need to have global operations and clinical development capabilities, which I don't think any of them really has to do.
Beyond that, it's processes, it's expertise, it's dealing with. I'm talking not about Chinese market, but the global market, and dealing with the FDA and so on. That's where we can really partner and benefit from each other.
I mean, my argument would have been obviously that there's the big ambition in China to deliver, and when China is ambitious, they put the resources behind it. And if I look at the character of the partners I'm interacting with, they're extremely open, they're eager to learn, they're eager to establish processes which were shown in the past to work, and therefore that's the reason why I think that they may not be the one with the first molecule, but I would certainly think that they will be the ones which will deliver sustainably compounds to the market.
I fully agree with you, Andreas, which is in terms of ambition, willingness to be in this business, to be in R&D, and to invest as much as they will need to get there. There is this absolute willingness to be successful in this field.
You have any comments?
Sure. Well, I think, the first thing to say is I think Asia has done tremendously well. There isn't a long pedigree of drug development in Asia. So considering it practically was a standing start, 15, 18 years ago, Asia has done well. In terms of where we're going to see it and what we're going to see, I fully agree with Andreas. It's going to be a biologic. There's a window of opportunity for this to happen between now and 2018. It will definitely happen. Where will it come from? I'm going to say it's going to come from Korea to begin with. And in terms of non-biologic, I would say China, because sheer volume of investment in discovery, in infrastructure in China, probability game would suggest that it will be China. So I would differentiate between a biologic and a non-biologic.
Do you agree, CY?
Yeah. Actually, maybe not only for China, but in order to have a sustainable business, I think from now on it will be very important to have a good candidate and a good approach to the development, and including precision medicine such as in oncology cases, we need to think about the companion diagnostic to have a right patient to treat. So in that sense, I think from now on, alliance or partnership with this diagnostic company will also important.
Okay, thank you. So I think we can open the panel now to questions from the audience. So I think, are there microphones around? Yes, I think so. You need to wait till you get a microphone. There's one coming there.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Paul Coleman, and I represent Hanwha Chemical of Korea. And we have a portfolio of novel biologics in development, so my vote would be Korea is where it may come out of, but I have a bias in that. But we also have a portfolio of biosimilars. And I would be interested in the panel's viewpoint on how you see the biosimilar development coming into the overall innovative environment of pharmaceuticals, and specifically to your company strategies. Are you, in the big pharma situations and Astellas, are you open to partnering with companies that have successfully developed biosimilars against some of the large biologics? Thank you.
No question for Astellas?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your question. Excellent question, I think. Actually, for Astellas cases, since we focus in proprietary drug, so biosimilar is not our scope. And also, I think biosimilar is a kind of challenge to get approval in terms of the manufacturing aspect in order to make sure the all specification to be the same as the original one. So in that sense, I do understand the biosimilar has a value for the patients, but in Astellas case, we do not intend to get into the biosimilars business at this moment. Thank you.
So Pfizer is definitely also in the biosimilar field. So we are developing our own biosimilar, and with regard to approval in countries like China, there is a big problem here, which is the number of patients requested for biosimilar approval. China requires now 600 patients total, and most of the cases you need roughly 1,200, 1,300 patients. So it's difficult to imagine that half of the patients will be coming just from China. So that's a big problem. So that means that you will have to develop biosimilar just for China and to have a specific development program just for China. I think we see it as instead of getting easier access to patients in China, is like preventing patients to get access of this biosimilar. So in fact, again, we would like to partner with SFDA and with Chinese government to facilitate the access of this biosimilar. So Pfizer is in this model, and we are trying to get these drugs approved as quickly as possible.
Any?
Yeah. I think biosimilars are not really an essential part of our R&D strategy. That does not apply to clearly biosuperiors. So I think we do believe that there is significant innovation potential, and that's always what we're concerned about with our resource and with our strategy, to go really for significant innovation for Jacques has said in his introduction, not the incremental, but really the breakthrough innovation in order to address future medical needs. Biosuperiors are part, biosimilars are not. And regarding Korea, I did not by any means try to underestimate the innovation power of Korea. I think there are areas where Korea is actually leading the pack worldwide. If I look at imaging capabilities, you mentioned a couple of other capabilities, I would think Korea is the place where it happens, both on the contrast media as well as on the molecular imaging side. So I hope you didn't get me wrong there.
You have any, does Astellas have any position or strategy regarding biosimilars?
Actually, as I said, Astellas focus in proprietary drug and not get into the generic. Reason why that in the whole generic and the biosimilar business can be done more well by the other companies. So in order to compete as a mid-sized company, so we decided not to get into biosimilar business. That's why I comment that way. Yeah.
And do you have any perspective or opinion on this?
I mean, the perspective that I have is from a development partner perspective, and we work with large pharmaceutical companies who have a biosimilars program and others who won't touch the space. So we see the whole spectrum in terms of the gentleman's point about Korea. I mean, obviously I had my vote on Korea. I think in Korea, we've got a fantastic convergence of scientific innovation, first in Asia infrastructure, in terms of hospital infrastructure, use of technology, and government support in terms of true investment in private development.
Jacques, to be clear, we are also in the bio-superior business too, just to make clear.
So actually, I'm the panelist, I'm not supposed to answer questions, but I will. So at BioMarin, two of our products are large molecule proteins, actually extremely complex proteins to manufacture. And most of the products we have in development right now are also either peptides or large proteins. We are not ourselves too concerned about the future impact of biosimilars on our business. We have actually no interest as a company to be in the biosimilar business. I think actually, to me, this is still an open question as to whether for the Western markets, for Europe and North America, probably Japan, there really is a business model for biosimilars. I remain to be convinced. That's my personal opinion, because I think the requirements of the regulatory authorities are very close to the one that are required for the innovators. And consequently, you know, someone, and again, I don't want to talk about Asia because I think it will be different for the Asian markets. But if someone wants to develop a biosimilar to some of the complex proteins we have to make, they're going to have to spend about 80% of what we spend to do it. And then they're going to probably have to have a commercial organization to market the product, because I don't think the docs, the geneticists that are prescribing our products will substitute automatically. They will be kind of branded generics. So they're going to have development expenses, commercial, manufacturing expenses, marketing expenses. And when you add all this up, they cannot reduce the price much because they lose money. And actually, there's a case in point in Europe. If you look at the growth hormones in Europe, I mean, there have been biosimilars growth hormones for about 4 or 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. And I think I've looked recently, but I think the market share is less than 10%. So consequently, I don't really know how this is going to work and how much of a business is going to be, at least in the short to medium term in Europe and Western Europe. I think there's probably a role for it. Look at the rules in China, I'm so pretty honest, but they're probably going to try, probably say in India, in Korea, they're probably make a business out of it. Some Asia Pacific region, but I think it's going to be tough for them to make money, in the Western world. That's my personal opinion. Maybe go far off that from a third-party vantage point here. Our partners who are in the space, their focus is very much on an emerging market strategy. So increasingly they see Africa, Latin America, Asia, the emerging strategy in that particular space. But it's going to be interesting that Biogen is important on this. I'm going to be following that, very interested. But I mean, I probably don't feel too threatened by the biosimilars in this. Any other comments on the panel?
As I mentioned before, I mean, I personally share with you, and I think my company does too, but I would step away from thinking that because it's my view is right. I think it's appropriate for each company to come up with a own strategy based on their portfolio, based on their regional setup and so forth. And what's right for Pfizer may not be right for Bayer, for very obvious reasons. So I think for us, it is right. For me, it's right to share with you, but it doesn't mean that you're right.
Okay, so other questions?
Myself, learning background, that's related in India. My question is, what is the top 2 key challenges for this innovation partnership, excluding experience, cost, language, and adoption?
Please select those. the top two challenges for this company or the panel?
My question is, what are the two top key challenges for this innovation partnership in Asia perspective, excluding experience, cost, language, and location?
What I heard was the top two challenges for partnering in Asia, concept, language, translation.
From our viewpoint, initially we had the challenge of quality. I think we mainly have overcome the challenge of quality. We've been very happy with the quality of, you can speak better from quality perspective, but very happy with the quality coming from clinical trials. In China, in fact, Japan and Korea rank at the top in terms of better than the US, better than Europe. So from the quality testing, we're still very careful in terms of selecting sites, depending on which indication, what type of product, but overall, I think we're good. So in terms of challenging, it's related to partnering. I'm trying to find the right challenge in Asia, maybe not best to take it off.
Thank you. Always happy to get something handed over. To be honest, I don't really see challenges in the Asia-Pacific region which are significantly different than I see partnering challenges elsewhere. It's rather when it comes to the mindset of partnering, I find it very often more the opposite. I find it is actually easier to get into discussions. It's easier to be flexible about what we want to accomplish together. It's easier to discuss science and establish yourself as a real partner where two really work together rather than the I pay serve type of relationship. So I have to say there are the usual partnership challenges I see everywhere. I can see some of them also in the Asia-Pacific region, but for a number of them, I do see them actually with a very benign approach.
Yeah, I think we've got another partnership here. I think it's down to mindset, as Andrea said. I think coming into a partnership in Asia with a legacy mindset and what they have learned in Europe or in the US is not necessarily the most successful approach to take. I think a lot can be done in Asia, given it's pretty much a blank sheet of paper in a lot of the space. So coming into Asia with a really innovative, open-minded mindset, win-win, and we talked about that earlier, is the one that can succeed. So it's a legacy mindset of trying to take a cookie-cutter approach in Asia that would be the most significant challenge. At a technical level, to Sam's point, in terms of quality, I mean, as an industry within the development space, that is a challenge in Asia. Industry grows very quickly. You've got a combination of investigators who are working for the first time, clinical research, you've got talent in the industry who are new, and you've got high growth. And those three factors result in a high-risk environment for quality.
Actually, I think challenge in Asia can be maybe a kind of mindset. Actually, when we seek some partnering or in-license, we do see a company itself, how the company is promising. So if we have some innovative drug originating from the Asian country, we are willing to partners or global basis. So just some kind of mindset, maybe a challenge.
You any other?
The first challenge, what I found interesting is that sometimes the challenge is not in Asia. The challenge is in the US and Europe to accept Asian data, and that's a reverse process. And we are very often convinced, the FDA and the EMA, that the quality of the data coming from Asia is perfect. Now, the number of patients coming from Asia is adequate to file in these countries. So I haven't found that much challenges in
your question.
Another question right there.
Actually, I'm an investor in China. We have a lot of cooperation with biopharma companies, and actually we have a very strong relationship with one of the largest pharmaceutical company in China, the pharmaceutical company. I have two questions for the panel. We talk so much about the foreign company entering in China. I think earlier as the deputy director of our Department of Commerce mentioned, in China continues to promote the foreign investment, bring the foreign company to China. However, if we look internationally, for the Chinese pharmaceutical company, we do not have much market share internationally. So the first question is, what's in your thinking, how to promote Chinese company, so the market share or brand name internationally? The second question I have is, we know nowadays the innovation power mostly lies in Western country, in European country. However, for the new drugs in China, especially for Chinese company, we are actually relatively weak. So in long term, maybe we can catch up. What's in your mind the short-term strategy for the Chinese company to promote their innovation power? Thanks.
I have my personal opinion.
Is related to how to handle Chinese companies.
What should be the strategy for homegrown Chinese biopharmaceutical company to develop globally?
So,
is that the question?
Yes, the first question will be how the Chinese domestic Chinese company will internationally. The second will be in short term, what's the best way to promote the Chinese company's innovation power?
I would say come up with innovative molecules. And I think that's what was discussed earlier. I think say that in terms of Japan, it hasn't really been, as far as I know, any global molecule coming out of any Asian economy so far. I think we talked about Japan, but I think in order for any companies to grow globally, they need to have a very innovative molecule that will be successful globally. That means they need to have very thorough, critical, and capable development plan that will be acceptable by regulatory authorities in the US and in Europe. It's been difficult so far, even for a European or American-based company, to use clinical data from Asia and get it accepted, as we heard, by the EMA and the FDA. Has been very difficult. I think it's changing, but I think a Chinese company will have to come up with an innovative molecule that is innovative enough to make it globally through the international markets. That would be my answer. Some of you differ.
I agree with you. That's what I believe we can partner. Is that at the point where Chinese companies will have their molecule, the factory, say, which is, then we can bring international expertise in drug development to together work toward the success of this new drug. It will be to the Chinese market, it will be to the global market. But I do believe at this point, at least, I haven't seen any drug moving this fast from China, and I do believe that it can be done with the multinational company. The one who has experience of developing drugs worldwide from a global perspective.
I certainly read here that if you look at the market share of Chinese company within China, has very dramatically increased over the last few years. And I think that is a natural first step if you get into that business. And I think there, this is much easier also path forward on to further strengthen Chinese companies by really asking ourselves the question as multinational companies, are there pieces of our portfolio which are attractive, especially attractive for China, which we could co-develop, which we could co-market with Chinese companies, further strengthen them within our own terrain. impact factors in journals, IP, patents, and so forth. If you look at universities like the Tsinghua University, the Beijing University, it's unbelievable what has developed there. We just have to get all those pieces together in the right process. And I think there is, again, something we as multinational companies can do, being a good, reliable partner and helping to really get complementary expertise together in order to develop an early and then late-stage portfolio.
Yeah, expand on that, just based on a lot of experience that we have a small research center in Shanghai where we do medicinal chemistry. There's a molecule that's in phase 1-2 right now around the world about brain, which is a cancer product, a so-called Moderator for genetically defined cancers. And that molecule was basically developed in association with 12 medicinal chemists in Shanghai. So this molecule actually could be a boundary for an American molecule. It's actually been fine-tuned in Shanghai. So definitely the innovative capabilities there. I think it will take a Chinese company to have a little ambition to, as I say, develop these molecules around the world in a very stringent way that will meet the hurdles of the European and North American regulatory authorities.
We were doing mindset, and I'm talking just about the personal experience here. I've met many entrepreneurs, many companies in China. Most of them are interested by the Chinese market. And they are not interested, as today, by the global market. They want to stay. So they said, well, we have 1.3 billion population, that's enough. We don't need to go elsewhere. You can take it elsewhere, but you want to stay in China. So also it's mindset. So if you want to move global, you have to have the global mindset. Or you can stay local if you want to, but different challenge.
I would love to say, I think some of the points earlier, that a lot has happened in the last 10 years. And the cost of true innovation coming down in this space. So I think if you want to fast forward over the next 5 to 10 years, we will see Chinese companies drive innovation globally from China. It will happen. But it cannot be rushed. It will happen.
So it looks like we could keep going for all day with these questions on a lot of interest from the others, but getting smoke signals from Vanessa, we don't really have time. So Vanessa, you want to take over now?
I'm really sorry I have to keep the session short, but thank you very much. I believe it has been a very insightful and interactive session as well. So on Asia's role in the pharmaceutical industry. So could we give a round of applause to our distinguished panel of speakers who will share with us. We will now be starting the exhibition ceremony promptly, so kindly proceed to the exhibition area to witness the opening ceremony. Thank you once again for taking the time to be here, and I wish you a pleasant and fruitful experience in our Biopharma Asia Convention. Thank you.